Hey guys, so Lord here, back again with another review, and today we'll be taking a look at the McFarlane Toys Spawn Universe Cy-Gor Megafig. And before we get into it here, let us first take a look-see at both the front and the back of the packaging. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we get into the meat and taters of this review, I would first of all like to say that this review right here is dedicated to Mr. TalkerArt, aka the King of Comparisons. And for those of you not in the know, TalkerArt is most well known for taking new incarnations of certain characters and comparing it to their past counterparts. And that is something that yours truly is going to try and live up to in this review right here. So please stay tuned for comparisons a little bit later. But for those of you who have not seen it yet, I will leave a link in the description below to his Cy-Gor review where he does just that. He pulls out literally every stinking figure that they've made of this guy and compares it to this one right here. It is something that is really cool to see, and something that I haven't really seen since the good old days of Mr. Glenn Webman. Rest in peace, my brother. So, with that being said, Cy-Gor does come with the standard hockey puck stand, which we're used to seeing in this line. Has a Spawn logo on it. Pretty self-explanatory and pretty useless as far as this guy's concerned, because I don't know if you guessed, but he's a little bit large and in charge to be using something so minuscule like that. But taking a closer look at our giant cyborg primate here, I actually did a little bit of research on Cy-Gor. I originally thought he was yet another experiment from the Mafia, but apparently he's not. He is an experiment from the US government that just seemed to have gone wrong, because of course it does. Do you not know what comic books are? Anytime there is a experiment involving the government, or anything for that matter, something always goes wrong, and Cy-Gor is the result of that. He's also a good guy nowadays, which is kind of interesting. But at any rate, I love this figure. I know it's not perfect. I know there are some things that could be improved, but spoiler alert, disclaimer, your boy is 100% in love with this figure. This is probably my favorite Cy-Gor in my collection, and that's saying a lot, because I'm really partial to Cy-Gor 2. You know, the one with the opening chest and the little robot monkey, which apparently has a name, to my understanding. I learned that in the Cy-Gor video I watched the other day. But at any rate, as far as articulation on this guy goes, his head is on a double ball peg, and you do get a decent amount of range out of this, considering his mouth is constantly stuck open like this. I'm not surprised they didn't give us a hinged jaw, because it would have broke the sculpt up here and it would have looked kind of fugly, so that's okay in my book. But I would have liked to have seen a hinged jaw, just to see what they could have done with it. But you can look up and down a little bit and rotate side to side. He can look side to side really well. I think that's the crowning achievement here. He can look side to side pretty well. As far as his arms are concerned, moving him over a little bit because these are big, you can move him out to the side, you can move him back down, you can rotate him forward and back. He does have a elbow hinge, which does work. Be mindful of these little tubers on the back though. Here, let's lift this up. Right there, you can see those tubers. Pointing at them with my thumb here. They are a soft, pliable material, but you do want to be wary of them. You don't want to tear them off, because, well, that would suck. Especially if your area is like mine, doesn't have a whole lot of these guys available. He does have elbow rotation, so you can rotate the elbow here. And that will actually help you with the tubers a little bit, too. If you rotate this a bit, it'll put a lot more slack on them, so they'll have more room to move. And then he has the hinge and swivel wrists, which I don't mind, to be honest with you. It's in frame. It's a pretty big figure, I'm not sure. I'm actually down at the ground level. I'm not using a tripod or anything to hold the camera up, but he's still a pretty big figure. But his wrists do have the hinge swivel, which again I prefer, but they are constantly in this knuckle dragging pose. And considering the fact that his hands are sculpted the way that they are, it would have been nice to get some hinge joints in there, especially in the thumb and maybe in the 4 fingers here as one unit. To kind of collapse him into a better looking fist, but I kind of cheat and use him as fists. I don't think it's that bad. And then his torso does rotate. It's on a ball joint. You can lift it up like this, and I think that's actually what I normally do, but we're going to leave it as is for now. But you can rotate this. I will say this diaper here is not the best. It's not glued in place, so it does have a tendency to fall down when you move his legs around. Like the best example I can give you is pushing these down. That is not ideal. So I typically don't move the legs a whole lot on this guy. I mean, that's really the only way around that. It kind of sucks that you can't straighten him out. And it kind of sucks that this is not glued in place or has a little bit cut out the back here. You could probably do that with an X-Acto knife. Just kind of cut a little bit of his buttocks off here and get that range without having to worry about the diaper falling to the ground. But as it stands, I don't mind him being in the all-4 stance. We've gotten plenty of Cy-Gors that stand upright, and I can't say we have a whole lot that can stand on all 4s. The anime-looking one, the more cartoony-looking one that came out, I think that one came out after the one that's like falling with Spawn in midair and whatnot. That's probably the best Cy-Gor as far as being able to stand him upright and on all 4s. I didn't have any problems doing either pose with that one. And then the vintage one is the other one that comes to mind. The very first Cy-Gor, you can stand him on all 4s, but he has an open hand, so it looks kind of weird. So to have one that stands on all 4s, I'm all for that. Though I do wish he had some swappable hands and maybe a little bit better range here, so he didn't have to do that. But again, it doesn't really affect how I'm going to display him. So I could deduct points, but I like this figure so much I don't think I want to do that. But we'll see come the end of the year if this guy stacks up to what else has been coming out, right? But his hips, back to that, they do move forward and back. They do move out, back in. He does have a nice thigh cut, so that's a plus. There we go. Really stiff hips too. I have to say, this guy has some of the best hips in the McFarlane Toys line, period. Anything. Any license. Like, that's crazy. He does have a double knee too, which is surprising to me that they gave him such good knee articulation that you really can't utilize. And it almost looks like he has a swivel here. It looks like a NECA joint, particularly the NECA King Kong. He had like hinge swivel joints in the knees like this, but I can't get anything to rotate here, so I'm not going to screw with that. I don't want to break anything. And as far as his feet go, they do hinge back and forward and have a little bit of a rocker to them. And peg holes at the bottom. For the stand, you don't really need. Because again, if he's going to be standing on all 4s, he can clearly support his own weight. And really, if you got him in this kind of squatting pose, almost like a vintage Masters of the Universe figure, his hands aren't touching the ground. So, you know, it's not the worst thing ever, but it's still not ideal to give him all that articulation in the legs, and you can't really stand him up. That does suck. I'm not going to say that doesn't suck. I'm not going to say it does. But at the end of the day, if you're into posing your figures a lot, I can see the drawback to that. Me personally, though, I really like this figure. I think he's awesome. I think he's got enough paint. I would have liked a little bit more. Could always use a little bit more, right? There's nothing wrong with a little bit more. And that's something I think the older figures do a little bit better. So with that being said, let us now move on and take a look at some comparisons. First up, here's our new Cy-Gor next to his vintage counterpart from Spawn Series 4. Next up, here he is alongside his second vintage counterpart from Spawn Series 12, I think it was, complete with Cyberchimp. And last but certainly not least for the Cy-Gor comparisons anyways, here's our new Cy-Gor next to his Raw 10 counterpart, who is absolutely dwarfing this new Megafig. Pitting Cy-Gor up against the only other Megafig we've gotten in this Spawn Universe line, here he is next to the Violator. Next up, here he is alongside a couple of standard figures from the Spawn Universe line, Raven Spawn and Gunslinger Spawn. And last but certainly not least, for real this time, here is Cy-Gor next to our two regulars, the Mythic Legion's Brother Mandibulus, the 11th Spawn, who's not towering over everyone today because Cy-Gor is a Megafig after all. Not a very tall one, but a Megafig nonetheless. So with that being said, time to wrap things up with some final thoughts. Overall, and even with its limitations, I still think that the good old Cy-Gor here is 110% worth the price of admission. Yeah, his articulation is quite limited considering how much he actually has as far as points of posability go, but at the end of the day, I wanted an articulated Cy-Gor, and in my opinion, I got an articulated Cy-Gor. Not perfect, mind you, but as far as my collection is concerned, I think this is my new favorite Cy-Gor. Even though I am quite partial to Cy-Gor 2, with his opening chest and little robot monkey pal and all. And I even like the Raw 10 one, as much of a statue as that one can be. And I have had pretty much every version of Cy-Gor at this point. I've even had the one that's a lot more like a Staction and came with a Spawn figure that looked like they were falling in midair and everything. That was a really solid figure too, but you could only pose it one way. This guy, even the Raw 10 one, you can pose at least a couple of ways, and that, in my personal opinion, is a vast improvement over that older release. Nothing wrong with that figure. If you're into the whole Staction thing and not really articulating your figures, that's cool. Nothing against that, but I like to mess with my figures a little bit, pose them up, see how they look, and even though this guy does constantly have the gorilla knuckle dragging hands, which does limit posability in a lot of ways, I still think this is probably the best Cy-Gor we've gotten so far. At least if you're into articulating your figures. If not, I think one of the older ones would suit your fancy just a little bit better, because I think the detail, especially on that Cy-Gor 2, was a little bit better than this one here. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you are so inclined, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know whenever I upload more reviews like this one. And if you haven't already, please hit me up on Instagram at Overlord Productions. But as always, keep the comments civil, because the world sucks enough as it is, especially when you can't keep your fur diaper from falling off. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.